Good morning. I'm honored to have been asked to share with you this morning, and especially honored to be here with Mark Sargent. I'll confess up front, though, that I initially thought this topic of light and darkness would be easy. So, see? Well, that was exciting. Whoa, everybody awake? I think so. I planned that. Okay, just take a moment. I'll back up, rewind. I'll confess up front, though, that I initially thought this topic of light and darkness would be easy. Sentimental, sweet, the perfect Christian metaphor. After all, light symbolizes pure goodness, and darkness represents all things evil, right? What else could I possibly say to you? But as my journalism students know, we can't ever take something at face value. We have to dig to find the story. We have to look at it from a lot of different angles with an open mind so that we come to new conclusions. And that conclusion is usually a glimpse of the truth. If we don't dig, it's lazy journalism and lazy citizenship. And since it really is a privilege to be up here, I realized I need to do a lot more thinking about this. The more I began to dig, the more I've come to realize that light and darkness are anything but easy metaphors for the Christian journey. In fact, they're like every good story, and every human being for that matter, messy, complicated, nuanced. In short, not easily categorized or defined. Consider how our collective story from Genesis chapter 1 sounds, the passage Professor Cobby just read. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. What? God created the darkness first? Who knew? And his Spirit hovered over it? Then he created light and saw it was good? Well, that's what it says. But notice God never said darkness was not good, bad, or even evil. He simply decided to separate the two. Light he called day, darkness night. Two different times to help us mere mortals navigate our way through this thing called life. The two were not opposites during those initial creative moments of the Lord's. He simply made the two equal parts of one day. In other words, we can't have one without the other. Just as morning and night form a single measure of time, light and darkness are connected. But this way of seeing is problematic in our modern culture, especially if you've been following the news lately. We'd rather use these metaphors of light and darkness as categories, opposites. You know what I mean. Some people are enlightened on issues of healthcare or the economy or the latest movie, while others are clearly in the dark. It's easier to define ourselves and others with emotionally charged, but always incomplete labels: conservative or liberal, Democrat or Republican, Christian or non-Christian, enlightened or clueless. Those on the left, or the right, depending on your perspective, become as evil and terrifying as Hitler. Those on the right, or the left, depending on your perspective, become as pure and holy as Mother Teresa. Opposites, as if the two had nothing to say to each other, or for that matter, had anything in common. As if a single human being could never be a mix of both. And what happens as a result? Polarizing. Distance. Morning with no night. That's where the metaphor gets messy. Because if darkness is, say, only evil, or if light is only good, well, I'm in big trouble. See, I love black coffee and dark chocolate. I like wearing black shoes and dark clothes because they hide the dirt better. I love sitting in the dark of a theater or a cinema, focusing only on a single story. And you can imagine how I, as a journalist, still love black ink on a light-colored newspaper, the kind that leaves smudge marks on my skin. But I also love the way light glides across the water just as the sun is setting, or the brilliance of the lights in the midnight sky we call stars. A particularly glorious sight when you're standing on a Colorado mountain, looking up and seeing as so many stars you forget there's any darkness at all. And I love watching the mesmerizing flicker of a candle or a campfire flame. Without the light, these dark moments would be formless, empty, and very, very sad. At the same time, light isn't all it's cracked up to be. I can't sleep at night when the lights are on. It bugs me when people drive at night with their headlights on high beam. And those fluorescent lights in some of the offices or classrooms on campus, well, they're so annoyingly bright, sometimes I can't see a thing. And don't even get me started on the relentless glow of a phone screen during chapel. Or my laptop luring me at night when I should be reading a book. Yep, light might sometimes be a good thing, but it also can be bad, dangerous even, especially if we want to stay in our comfortable assumptions about ourselves and others. I've never liked it, no matter how old I've been, when the light of truth exposed my fears or faults or sins. Let me illustrate. When I was about 11, I begged my mom for weeks to let me camp out in the backyard. Finally, she gave in, so I rolled up my little green sleeping bag, grabbed my pillow, and scoped out my space by the back fence. And when I realized it was a lot darker than I had imagined, I did what most suburban kids in the 1970s would do. I ran back into the house and grabbed the miniature black and white TV set my dad had brought home from work one day. I pulled my sleeping bag right next to the house, jarred the screen door open slightly for the extension cord, and crawled on my belly into the house, or into the bag. I turned on the Tonight Show. Do you guys remember that? Just in time for Karnak the Magnificent. And I screamed, not at the show, but at the long, slithery, probably poisonous creatures that were suddenly crawling across the TV screen. The light of the television had made visible the bugs I otherwise never noticed. It exposed them. And in the process, it exposed my fear. I didn't camp out much after that. You see, I'd pretended to be a courageous little camper with my mom, when really I wasn't. Just as now, I can pretend to be a good Christian, or a spiritual woman, or a responsible citizen. But if you were to dig into the story of who I really am, you'd find a whole lot of bugs and messes mixed into only an occasional good morning. I'd rather leave a lot of things in the dark, even if I know in my head that exposing the critters would be healing or change, bring healing or change. I'd too often prefer the darkness of my own control or the world's delusions, because frankly, that's just easier than grappling with the historic truth of the God who hovered over the darkness of our world, who saw the polarizing finger-pointing of human beings and still chose to enter it as a man for our sake. But easier doesn't mean it's better. And so the reality of light and darkness is a mixed bag, to be sure, an ongoing story full of irony and grace and mystery that can never be reduced to categories any more than we can. Thankfully, though, the more the light of God's patient love hovers over our hearts, the more we begin to see more clearly who we really aren't, and the less we tend to toss labels across other people. But it doesn't come naturally. Only by looking at the one who claimed to be the light of the world, yet gave up his light to become darkness for us, will truth emerge. And that's not easy either. Watching him hang in excruciating torture as darkness came over the land, as the creator of night and morning abandoned his son, something so divinely painful that the earth shook and the rocks split. It was the darkest moment in human history. And yet, when his friends saw no flicker of hope, he shocked them, not by running for a second in the dark, but by shattering it with life, genuine flesh and blood, ready to eat fish, breathing the ocean air, life. A life so real and so electrifying that anyone drawn to it now can't help but see everything new. That light of life exposes the complexities of our beings, reconciles us to other equally complex beings, unifies us even with those we'd otherwise take only at face value. That light of his, the gospel, hovers over each of us, calling for us to dig and dig until we get a glimpse of truth. And you know what? I can't imagine a better way to start the morning or any better reason to say good